inner confidence as a potential franchise owner in your ability to follow the plan and to succeed. If you don't have confidence in yourself, you really shouldn't be looking at business at all. What information, Tariq, can I give you today that's going to make you comfortable moving forward? We haven't even talked about what brand you're interested in yet. I don't even know how much you want to invest in a business. I don't even know if your wife is on board with any of this. So which is it? Do you want to do the process or not? And if you don't, I clearly respect it, but I don't really have any more bullets in my gun for you. I don't know what to say to you because I have no idea what the profit of your business is going to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 3.5 years from now in a painting business. How do I know? How does anybody know?
Welcome to the Zero to Profitable Franchise Podcast, the best place for you to come to figure out the right franchise to buy and how to get and stay profitable. My name is Tariq Johnson, and I've bought, grown, and sold multiple franchises and got myself free from corporate America, and now I'm on a mission to help you do that too. Here you'll find some of the most in-depth profitable franchise secrets, tangible strategies, and specific mindsets to help you create your dream life through franchising. Well, I do want to pivot and throw a bit of a curveball that wasn't on our agenda, but Mark, one of your comments made me think about it. The topic is around buying a franchise, starting a business, and how to have that conversation with your spouse. As we know, and actually, let me start with a story. Which is, so when my wife and I were looking into buying a franchise, we're doing our due diligence. And as we know, everyone can be gung-ho throughout the process, kind of moving along. And then as it gets, right around that decision time, everything starts coming up, right? The fight or flight, the do I really want to do this? There's a lot of emotions that the rubber hits the road. And so I remember as we were getting to that point and, seriously considering, signing the franchise agreement, and my wife was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't want to do it? Like, we just went through this whole process. Like, this is like my only way out. Cause at that time I had 9 failed businesses over the previous 6-7 years of trying to start things on my own. And I felt confident at that point. I'm like, I can follow a system. I believe that I can be successful through franchising. I may not be the best at starting something from scratch, which turns out I was able to then use my lessons and learning in franchising to then start something from scratch, which is pretty cool. But what happened was we had a heart to heart, and she said, listen, I don't think you're going to follow through. Like, you don't have a good track record in my eyes with following through on businesses. So what? We're going to take $300,000 out of our house. What happens when you don't want to do it anymore? What happens when it gets hard? What are we going to do then? And I'll tell you what, it was like it was painful to hear that feedback, but just like any good feedback, it may hurt at first, but then you go, you got a point there. And so I remember looking my wife in the eyes saying, I promise you, we will not fail and I will follow through on this. And it almost felt like, if you guys have ever experienced being in a scenario where you had adrenaline pump through your veins, where you were then able to pull something off because of the adrenaline that you normally weren't capable of. And making that statement and commitment and basically like putting my marriage on the line, provided me this resourcefulness where I 100% knew we would not fail. But that was not an easy conversation. And people that we work with on an everyday basis, sometimes they hop on these calls and it's like, how does your wife or husband feel about this? You're like, I haven't talked to them yet. Or they're not on board. And in many cases, they're fully on board and fully supportive. But those aren't the people that need this message the most right now. The people who need what we're about to talk about are the people that their spouse is iffy, not 100% on board, or maybe not on board at all. So Laura, let's start with you. How do you navigate those conversations? And what was your experience like when you were starting your businesses?
Yeah, I'll start with how I navigated my business. I just said, hey, this is what I'm doing. And then
I think we know who wears the pants in Laura's family. I think that's pretty clear.
Okay, it might not have been
Laura's husband, but I think I understand that she was calling the shots in that duel.
Okay, it might not have been that cut and dry, but I had made the decision and I had found it, but he was involved from the beginning. I mean, and we had owned other businesses and done other things entrepreneurial wise before that too. So it wasn't like he wasn't as risk averse as some of our candidates that we're talking to right now, right? So it's a little bit different in our scenario. So he wasn't surprised that I was like, hey, I'm going to do this. Like, do you want to come with me to some of the conversations I'm going to have? And of course he was going to, and he did. But it was important to get him involved right away. And that's one of the things that I do when I'm talking with candidates as well is, what's your spouse's name? Are they going to be involved in the business? Are they just supporting you in the business, or are they actually going to run the business with you, right? Because there's a differentiator there as well. And like you said, Tarek, a lot of the candidates we're talking to, their spouse is already on board. That's why they're investigating this and looking into franchising. But for the ones that aren't, we need to have that spouse involved, because honestly, like, you trying to relay what you just heard from the franchisor or from the franchise brand, the developer, and trying to tell everything to your spouse that they just said, you're never going to be able to repeat it in the same way that they explained it to you, right? So it's really important to say, and just let that spouse know, look, we're not committing to anything. And we tell them that too. Like, we're just at the very beginning stages of this iceberg, right? We're just at the tip top of it. We're scratching the surface. You have to get the information first before we even know if this is the right path for you, right? We don't even know that. And that's part of this process as well. But at least get your spouse on some of the calls. And if it's recorded, have them listen to some of those calls, right? So when they're hearing it from the horse's mouth, then it's not coming from you. And sometimes that's what you need. You need your spouse to hear it from someone else, because now they're hearing it differently. Because just like Tarek mentioned with his past experience, he was hearing, his wife was hearing what was coming from him, and she was just hearing what had already happened and relating it to everything that happened in the past. So in order for them to see it differently, they have to hear the information from someone else. So that's why it's so important to have them actually participate in the calls. And even if they can't join the ones with us as the brokers, it's important for them to be on the brand calls and the validation calls with other franchisees, because they're actually hearing their experience, what their expectations going to be being a franchisee in their system. And they're hearing it right from the horse's mouth, essentially. And that's what we want them to get.
Yeah, 100%. Mark, what's your take?
I think if you're married and you want to stay married, you want to have a good marriage, then you have to realize that it's not your money, it's our money, right? So if I'm talking to, if I'm a candidate and I'm interested in a franchise and I'm talking to Laura about franchise opportunities, and I'm talking about investing hundreds of thousands of dollars of money, I have to say it's not my money, it's our money. And if I don't get my wife involved in that up front, it's probably just not going to happen. We, Laura and I, have to be really kind of cognizant of that, and we have to decide how to play that out. But again, it's if you're committed to becoming an owner, and I'll give you my story, because I think we were, and I think we did it right. We, as partners, discussed the possibility of investing in a brand. I think everybody who's listened to these podcasts know I was involved with Five Guys. So we decided that that's what we were going to pursue. There were 3 partners. The 6 of us got together, the 3 partners and the 3 spouses, for dinner, and we had a conversation about it. And we got everybody's nodding head that this is something we were just going to look into, not necessarily go forward with, but look into, because we knew that if we didn't have that partnership going forward, it just wasn't going to happen. So again, I think you have to understand it's not your money. Now, maybe if you're a single guy or a single woman and you got all this money, that's even better, because then it is your money. But if you're a spouse, then it's not yours, it's shared. And the best deals are the ones that are collaborative. So we collaborated, and our wives got involved every step of the way, and they were very confident about how the program went. Now, it got a little ornery, because when we wrote our operating agreement, we said the wives don't have any say in the business. That was a little bit of an issue at the time, but we don't have to go into that now. We took our lumps on that one, but they were involved. They were committed to it. They were glad we were going to do it. And again, I said this earlier, but if we're doing our job right as franchise brokers, and we're consulting and guiding people, and they're not willing to get their wife or husband on a call, that's telling me they're really not vested in the process. Because those who are vested, those who have gone through the process, who ultimately become franchise owners, are very happy and collectively to get their spouses involved because they know it's not going to happen without it. So it's kind of a silly topic when you think about it, but it's really a line of delineation on people who are really interested and those who aren't. Because if you are, then your wife should be part of this, or your husband needs to be part of it, because you know you're not going to go forward unless they support it. It's just kind of silly. So why waste time? And Laura and I, the one commodity we can't get back in our lives is time. So we got to be cautious. We're very fortunate here at Franchise Empire. We get lots of really good people who want to talk to us. We can't sometimes talk to everybody in a day. So I'm going to prioritize my time with people who are following that process and doing it the right way. And getting your spouse involved right out of the gate is absolutely the right way.
The last thing I think I would add really quick is if you're scared to have that conversation with your spouse, that could be a sign too that maybe it's not the right path for whatever reason. But if you really want to do it, then you just got to rip off the Band-Aid and have the conversation. You might actually be surprised by what they say. They might not be happy with what they're doing either, and I think finances is one of the toughest topics in most marriages, right? So, I think you got to kind of feel it in your gut. Like, I just feel like I'm meant to do this. And I think that's what you were talking about, Tark, with that moment where you had that adrenaline running through you. You felt like this is it. Like, this is what you were supposed to do, at least in that moment. So when you kind of have that feeling or something's really resonating with you and you feel like you're being called to that, you got to bring it up. I mean, at the end of the day, whatever happens is the decision that both of you make, but you at least have to have the conversation. You might be surprised by what your spouse actually says.
Yeah, and good point. And on top of that, when you get over that obstacle and you go forward on it and you are locked in with your spouse, then you have a partner to celebrate the victories and the successes with as well. And it just makes the whole experience all that more rewarding. So not really a lot of downside to bringing in the spouse right away. And yes, it's very telling if they do or don't.
Hey, so I recently put together a list of 5 low-cost franchises that make $1 million or more. If you want to see that list, then click the link below in the description or go to franchiseempire.com/low cost. Let's get back to the episode. Yeah. And I think for some people, or at least what I'll kind of double click on, because you guys all made really, fantastic points, is how to have that conversation. I think as human beings, what I have experienced is we're all flawed in the manner in which we communicate. And in a perfect world, this is some of the things that I'll say to Bridget sometimes. Maybe she'll be upset at a client or a team member or whatever. And I just try to remind her and myself, if I run across those situations, in a perfect world, we would all communicate perfectly. But that's not the world that we live in. And so I think there's some instances where it's like, how are you approaching your spouse with the conversation? If you're coming through trying to bully through the conversation or guilt through the conversation, it's probably not going to lead to the best result. So it's like, how are you approaching it tactically? Here's the best way that I think to approach the conversation with your spouse if they are not on board, which is be vulnerable. Share with them your why. Now, as men, I know we're not the best at being vulnerable and sharing our emotions, but you need to, especially if your wife or your spouse is fearful and not on the same page. So it's like, hey, honey, I don't know that I've really shared it this directly with you, but I'm really not very happy with my work right now. And I've always had this dream of being an entrepreneur, and I want to create this legacy for our family. So, I've been looking into franchising, and I want you to be open-minded about it because this is really important to me, at least to look into it, and I'd like your support. That's going to go totally different if in passing you're like, oh, hey, by the way, I'm looking into buying a franchise. I'll let you know if if it's interesting and if you should get on the call. It's going to go completely different, right? So there's a manner in which to have the conversation that I think would go a long way in those instances when your spouse is not on board. Okay, let's talk about profit margins. So it's the common topic, probably one of the most popular questions that people ask around how much profit can I make owning a franchise or owning this business. Now, we would all agree that the profit potential of a business and a franchise is extremely important. Having a clear understanding of if you can make a living or the living that you need to with the business opportunity is something that you need to have clarity on. But there is a tremendous amount of complexity in the conversation of profit margins of businesses, how they're measured, and kind of what that looks like overall. So let's kind of dive into how you guys have that conversation, along with what is your best advice for someone looking at buying a franchise to understand the overall profit potential or cash flow potential of what the business is. Mark, let's start with you.
I guess the best way to say this is my approach to this is profitability of any business, including franchise businesses, is 100% up to the ability of the owner to execute the profit. When you invest in a franchise, there's never a guarantee on profit. There's not even a ballpark guess on profit. The franchisors are going to provide a lot of information. 90% of it is sales volume and maybe cost of that sales, a gross margin maybe, right? They're not going to give you net profit margin, which is what people are asking. People aren't coming and saying, if I do $1 million of a painting business, how much do I have to spend on paint? They're not asking us that question. They don't want to know that. They don't want to know the cost of paint. They want to know what's the bottom line. How much do I put in my pocket, which is completely controllable by the franchisee. And when we're talking to our candidates on the first time and they're asking us that question, I say, I have no idea what the profit is potential. I would say, how good are you? If that'll be the derivative of how successful you're going to be. But what I try to get, on a more serious note, I say there's a process that we're going to go through. And I talk about, first of all, what's most important is that you get involved with really good franchisors who really care about the success of the franchise network. That's one of the advantages of Franchise Empire or really good franchise brokers is we know which brands are even best to be introduced to you. So let's first start at finding out your why. Why are you in business? Then which brands might be best suited to your acumen, your ability, your skill set, and your desires. Once we get there and you start talking to the franchise owner, you're going to get all the financial information that you want in terms of the FDD and how much sales gets done there. Then you're also going to have a lot of an opportunity to talk to as many other franchise owners, we call that call validation, as possible. And when you're talking to a franchise owner who's been running his franchise business for 5 years, I think it's a fair, as part of the question you're talking to them is talk about how much money you make in profitability. Maybe they'll answer it. When I was a franchise owner and people called me to do validations, I wouldn't tell them what my profit was. I would say that's none of your business, what my bottom line profit was. The other part of it is the three of us could own the same ABC painting company. We could all do $1 million worth of sales and our profits are all going to be different. How are we running the business? So I try to get people to understand that you need to know profit, but you're going to ultimately build a business plan and a pro forma that's going to be your roadmap to success. That business plan and pro forma will talk about your profit that you'll have to execute. But honestly, Mr. or Mrs. Candidate, we're not even there yet. You don't know the brand. You don't even know where you are. So please, let's try to get that out of their mind. It's hard to because that's all they're thinking. But if that's all they're thinking now, they're not focusing on the right things. There's going to be plenty of time to learn about the profitability, but it's going to be on your business plan based on the information you gather from franchisees and franchisors, and then you're going to go out and the ability to execute it. Sometimes people don't want to hear it. They want to be told, write the check, go to Tahiti, get your foot massage, and you'll get a 25% bottom line profit. That's not going to be how. It's not going to work that way. So yes, it's important, but we as brokers don't know. And franchisors don't know. The only one who knows the profitability of the business is the person running the business. And that's what you got to get at. And that's actually a very hard thing for people to understand. I think that's the biggest obstacle we have, frankly.
Yeah. Laura, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I agree. And that's what I tell candidates as well. But the other thing I'll add to that is once they receive the FDD that's going to show system-wide past history of performance, right? Financial performance. And they look at that item 19. A lot of times too, I'm directing them back to the membership. I say, hey, have you watched the FDD breakdown in your portal, in your membership portal? There's modules in there to help lay that out for you and explain to you what each section is and tell you exactly what's in that FDD and how to understand it in those different things. And you want to look at the 4 videos that talk directly about the item 19 or the 4 videos that go through the whole thing, but there's a specific video in there that talks about the item 19. So that item 19 is the financial performance of the brand. And the cool thing about it now is most of the brands we work with, this wasn't the case, 12, 15 years ago, almost now, when I started my franchise, but they provide the candidates with a UE workbook, a unit economics workbook. So they're getting actual numbers kind of pre-filled, and then the candidate gets to work backwards based on the numbers that are in there as disclosed expenses, right? From the item 6 and 7, they get to work backwards now and figure out, okay, if these are my expenses and this is roughly my all-in to get started, my initial investment, and these are the expenses I can expect, and I want this bottom line number, what do I have to fill in the in-between here? What do I need to find out? And that goes to what Mark was talking about. Those blanks that are not filled in yet on your unit economic workbook are what you need to get from the franchisees that are already in the system. That's what you're validating. That's what you're going back to, because you need to find out what those numbers are or could be based on what you think your performance would be. And the only way, and what I tell candidates is, you're not going to know how you're going to perform inside the system. You just don't know that. You're not going to know until you actually do it. But the one thing you can do is I recommend you talk to at least 2 or 3 people that are in the bottom, 2 or 3 people that are in the middle, and 2 to 3 people at the top. And you want to find out why they're at the bottom, why they're in the middle, and why they're at the top. And then you want to say, am I just as good as this gal or girl, gal or guy at the bottom? Am I just as good as the girl or guy in the middle? And same at the top. And if you think you're just as good as all of those different categories, then you want to say, good, now I'm going to match myself up against the person that's in that bottom quartile. Because if you're going to use those bottom numbers and you actually surpass that, well, then that's just bonus for you, right? But let's use the bottom numbers to be a little more on the conservative side. If you want to use the middle quartile, that's fine too. But I try to keep them to not compare themselves against the top performers. I'm not saying they won't be a top performer, but let's shoot on the conservative side and aim low as far as figuring out our numbers. But once you get in the system, then aim high, right? You know what you're capable of, but you can use those numbers as a baseline and put those in there to figure out, okay, if I'm just as good as this person and these are their numbers, I can expect to have this as my bottom line. And then use that as your barometer. And again, there's no guarantee. And that's why we can't tell people what they're going to make. We have no idea how good you are. You're the only one who's going to know that once you get started. But at least you can use this as somewhat of a template to kind of gauge if that brand even makes sense for you to get started with.
I'll add one other thing, because that's a great point, Laura. And what we're both saying is the same thing. You have to have inner confidence as a potential franchise owner in your ability to follow the plan and to succeed. If you don't have confidence in yourself, you really shouldn't be looking at business at all. So it starts with that level of confidence. And I agree with you on the call validations. We made 40 validation calls when we were doing our business. 40. Insane amount. Didn't need to, but we did. So we had a really good idea. We knew what the average unit volume was across the chain. We knew it. When we built our template, which was provided, we said, we're really good. We're really smart. We're really cocky. We're really arrogant. We're going to do better. And, we had some guidance that thought, but the region where we were had higher unit volumes. We built our pro forma at 10% above average unit volume, because we were talking to a bunch of people who were average, and we said, we're a lot smarter than them. They're a bunch of dopes. Again, we were cocky, which we learned not to be. We were arrogant, which we learned not to be, but we were. But we built our business plan at the 10% number. And every conversation we had as owners that we were operating the business was, how are we doing to our plan? That was our governing document, because we worked really hard to get it. We reverse engineered it and we executed on it. If we got to 8%, well, what do we need to do? So again, you got to work to get that. No one's handing you that, but that's what you have to do. And if you don't have the confidence to succeed, and that's what we're trying to find out in these first few calls, where you going? If you don't believe you can do it, then you can't. And typically franchisors will find that out, and most often franchisees will elect off when that happens.
Hey, so if you want to learn the right way to own a money-making franchise without putting your family at risk financially, then check out our free masterclass at franchiseempire.com/masterclass. Let's get back to the episode. Yeah. And to, basically to kind of summarize what you guys have said, there's essentially kind of three different ways to identify the financial opportunity and profit potential. Number one, item 19, and seeing what the past historical sales were. Number two, franchisee validation, talking to actual franchisees. Mark talked to 40 of them. And number three is doing a pro forma, or what's also called unit economics. And I love that, Laura, that you mentioned that, and I know, Mark, that you did too. I think franchisors, if it's not a part of their process, like providing a template for a pro forma, I think they're really missing out, because it, in my experience, when I've worked with franchise buyers, sometimes towards the end, they get wishy-washy, just like, I still don't have a lot of clarity. Like, I am not clear on what the actual financial potential is. It's like, okay, have you done a pro forma? Have you put together the numbers, and have you looked at them and played with them? It's like, no. It's like, well, that's why. Until you get the math on the paper and on the spreadsheet and kind of see what that looks like, you're just not going to know. And I mean, Mark knows, before I decided to shift our business model of Franchise Empire, I did a pro forma so that I could understand, okay, if we go this path, like, what does that look like? Well, what would our projections need to be? What would our targets need to be in order for this to be worth it and successful? And if someone's not doing that and really kind of looking at the numbers visually, it's going to be very hard to get to a point of enough comfort, because you're never going to be fully comfortable, but enough comfort to move forward. And then I think I'll play devil's advocate for a second on the side of, the franchise buyers, just for fun, which is, I think in the beginning, the mindset is, well, hey, but I don't want to get too far in the process if I can't replace my income at some point. So I respect the process, guys, but like, what if no one is making the amount of money that I need to make in this business? I'd like to know that sooner than later. What would you guys say to that, if that was someone's comment?
I think I would just say sorry. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I think I would say that. I'm not kidding.
I figured that's what Mark was going to say, so I thought I'd have to get my foot in the door first. I say, I mean, truthfully, the only real way they can even get to that point of understanding if that's possible is to have that at least third call to get their FDD. That's the only thing they can even use to regulate what that past history or performance of the system has done. And some brands break it down very differently. They might not do it by franchisee or by territory. They might just do it system wide. But I think I would say probably the majority of the brands that we work with and represent, and the reason that they're in our portfolio in the first place, is because we know the success of their franchisees. There's always going to be people at the bottom. Not everybody can be at the top. It's just impossible, right? So there's always going to be the bottom, the middle, and the top. I believe that most of the franchise brands we represent have every opportunity for someone to make as much money as they want to make. But if someone, to what Mark was talking about before, if someone's coming in though, and they're like, I need to make 150 or 200,000 in the first year, in my opinion, that's an unrealistic expectation. When I started my franchise businesses, I was involved in my business the first 2 years, getting it up and going, setting the atmosphere, setting the environment, and everything that came into that business that I didn't need to help support our family went back into the business because I needed to continue to grow and expand the business. There's always something, and you talked on it real briefly, and I don't want to go too far on a tangent, but Mark does. So I'm just going to say that sometimes we look at expenses and things that we're spending money on as a cost, when actually we have to turn and flip-flop our perspective and think of it as an investment. Like, people really do get caught up on marketing, right? And it's like, you're looking at that as a cost when it's actually an investment, because you're getting a return on that marketing. That's how you're getting more clients. That is how you're being visible, so there's a flip-flop there. But I think it's really an unrealistic expectation to not think that you're going to have to put money back into the business. You can't pull everything back out. You're going to kill your own company, in my opinion. So I think we can look at the FTD and see that there's a realistic track history of you being able to make the money that you want to make. Now, whether or not it's smart for you to pull that out in the first year, I don't think that makes sense. If you want to do that, you can. But I think the majority of the brands that we represent have that capability in every way, shape, or form. It's just going to do more digging. But I don't think people should go into it with that expectation.
Tarek, I'll go back to your comment because what you brought up is a realistic scenario, right? What you just said. So I'll kind of role play this with you if I could. So I think what you said, Tarek, is you appreciate the process that you need to go through to become a franchise owner. But now you're saying you're not sure about that until you know what the profitability is going to be. So I would say to that that's a huge contradiction. Because if you do respect the process, and you have enough confidence in Franchise Empire and Laura and I, which obviously you have to gain, but if you have that respect, we're walking you through this process. The process, I agree with you, Tarek. My gosh, we didn't sign on the dotted line until we had a real good business idea of what we think we could make. So you got it. But where we are in the process, I don't know. What information, Tarek, can I give you today that's going to make you comfortable moving forward? We haven't even talked about what brand you're interested in yet. I don't even know how much you want to invest in the business. I don't even know if your wife is on board with any of this. So what are we talking about here really, right? What are we really talking about? I promise you, if you work with this system, before you make any commitment and write any checks, you're going to have all that. But we're not there yet. So if you do respect the process, please, let's go down that road. If you can't, I get it. But I don't think we're going to be able to work together because I can't give you what you're looking for. Nobody can but yourself, in conjunction with other people along the way who you're going to be introduced to in the process. So which is it? Do you want to do the process or not? And if you don't, I clearly respect it, but I don't really have any more bullets in my gun for you. I don't know what to say to you because I have no idea what the profit of your business is going to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 3.5 years from now in a painting business. How do I know? How does anybody know? So again, I think it's a fair question, and more people than we get, that's really what their singular focus is. How much will I make? We have to get them off that temporarily and see if they're engaged. And again, we know, Laura, right? Because those who say, I get it, thank you, follow the plan, and they get a real high likelihood of ending up successful. Those who are like, yeah, but, when people say, yeah, but, what they're saying is everything you just said, I don't agree with. We can't help everybody, right? We just can't. And I would say our numbers are what? What's Tarek? We get 2 or 3 out of 10 that ultimately sign. But I mean, the percentages are kind of like what a baseball batting average would be, right? You don't hit 1,000. So we're not going to be able to help everybody, but we're going to give them that same guidance along the way. And I think that's all we can tell them. Profitability is so important, but how much do you want to make? And we have 3 people here. We all might have a business plan or a pro forma for the same business that's completely different.
I love that. I love the role playing that and acknowledging and just being empathetic, right? Of just like, hey, we get it, totally get it. Like this has to make sense financially for you to move forward, and we're just not even at the step yet, really, for you to even make a decision. Like, you still need to figure out if this is even the path that you want to go. But let's dive into something real quick, which is, well, how much do you make right now in your job? You make $150,000. Well, why are you leaving?
Right. Let's go back to there.
Right? Why are you leaving? Well, because of this is this. Exactly. So which is it just about the money for you in the business? I know it's important. No, it's not just about the money. Exactly. So if you were making $150,000 in a franchise that you hated the type of employees that you worked with, you hated that the business didn't match with your beliefs, it didn't align with your skill sets, is that the franchise that you want to be in? No. Okay, great. So we need to make sure that it aligns first with what your goals are, with the life that you want to experience. And then, yes, 100%, we need to make sure that the business has the proper financial potential for you. And if it doesn't, I'm with you. You should not move forward, right? And so I think that's really part of the conversation, which is what we're all saying in our own different words, overall. And it's also why I have always in the past told people, and in our, Zero to Profitable Franchise System and the course modules, get to franchisee validation as quickly as humanly possible, because that's when the rubber meets the road. When you get to talk to current franchisees, You get to understand a day in the life. You get to understand the tough days. And if you can put up with it, because this is going to be hard. Let's not pretend. I know we aren't pretending, but just so it's like, how much of it can you handle? And when you race to get to franchisee validation, you'll that's when you slow the process down a little bit. You get a little bit more thorough, and you'll be able to get the clarity on the answers that you're looking for from the people that are actually running the business day to day. And don't get too caught up on percentage of margins, because you might talk to a franchisee who says, I'm making 7%, but what they forgot to tell you is that's what shows on their profit and loss statement, but they are taxed as an S corp, and they pay themselves a reasonable comp salary of $60,000 a year that you have to add back into the 7%, and that actually brings them up to 15 or 17 or 18, or that they actually have. I was just texting with a guy that I've been golfing with who's an entrepreneur, and he was telling me, yeah, I pay my my 6-year-old under the business because I'm legally allowed to. I pay him whatever, the 12 grand or something I can pay him a year, and it's all legit and whatever. So what they're not telling you is in that 7%, I'm also paying my kid a little bit. I'm paying my wife a little bit. I figured out a way to legally justify paying for my car for my business. Now I pay for my cell phone within my business. My retirement contributions are in the P&L, and they forgot to tell you about all the add backs that are in there. And that may not be the case at all. There also could be someone who's only making 7%, and that's all they're making at all. But you're not going to know until you actually have the conversations with the franchisees and dig into it.
So true. And I'll add one other point on top of it, because I think we're all saying the same thing. But that's, again, where there's an advantage working with brokers. And obviously we're biased to Franchise Empire, because what we're saying is all the things we just talked about, the comfort level you have, Mr. and Mrs. Candidate, is there's 4,000 franchises out there. So if you don't know which ones are to call or not, then you're going to get into a lot of trouble. We've taken that step away. We've narrowed that process down to about 300 brands that we know, we've worked with. We have an intimate knowledge of the success of the network. So you're way ahead of the game working with us, because we're only going to introduce you to these brands that have had that success. Using Google to say what's the franchises around me, that's when you kind of play it on a slippery slope. So that's just an example. But again, we've got a system in place, and it starts with identifying which brands are even in our portfolio, which brands do we want to affiliate with to introduce to you, and then everything you just said, Tarek, takes in from there. So again, part of the process. And again, we get the beauty of seeing it blossom, and we can tell who's going to go through it or not, because they're engaging, and they should be on the phone with us or on a Zoom call with us because they want to hear what we have to say, because we're the professionals, right? You know, when you go to the doctor to get your knee looked at, you're going because your knee hurts. You want someone to tell you about what your knee is. You don't know. So that's kind of what we are. I think we need to always we can't be afraid of sharing our expertise with our candidates, because that's really why they should be here in the first place.
Yeah. Laura, any last comments that you wanted to make based on Mark and I's? Or
I was just going to say real quick, I think the reason that they're really asking that is out of fear, right? Because everyone has a fear when they're starting a business and taking on that risk that they're going to fail. And so ultimately it's really coming back to mindset. And I know there's, we could talk about that for hours, and especially I could, it's really mindset. And Mark even mentioned it before. You have to have confidence in yourself and in your abilities to be successful. Even if you don't know what you're doing, you still have to be confident in yourself and say, but I can do it. Whatever it is, I can do it. And I think once you take out that fear and realize that you can do it, now it takes away the dollar amount. It lessens that hard stop at the 150 or whatever the number is, right? It softens it a little bit, because now it's like, you know what? I know I'm capable of making whatever it is that I need to accomplish in that first year or whatever it is. So once they can shift that mindset a little bit, it helps soften the number, and it kind of starts to fall to the back, a little bit, because then they realize that there's actually other things that were more important to them that they thought that 150,000 represented.
Yeah, landfills are full of business plans that were not executed, right? So just because you have a pro forma that you've spent all this time working on, and that's your roadmap, doesn't mean you're going to be successful. So it goes back to, are you going to do it? Are you going to get in there and do it? And if you're going to do it, and then you're going to start soaring like we did our business model, First year we looked at it, we ripped it up because we were killing it. We exceeded it. We rewrote it. So it comes down to, again, we have a business plan, we know, but it's got to be executed. Otherwise, it's just number on a spreadsheet, which nobody gets rich staring at numbers on spreadsheets. So I shouldn't say that. Analysts do, but not franchise owners. I shouldn't. That's what I meant. Franchise owners don't get rich looking at spreadsheets.
100%. Awesome. Hey, before we go, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't already. And the biggest thank you that you could ever give me is to share this episode with someone who you think will benefit. That means that we can share this message with more people and hopefully positively inspire them like we have you. So thank you. And until next time, go build your empire.